Morning. We are live, hopefully. We should be live on Facebook in the business growth community, on LinkedIn, and also on YouTube. So we're multi-streaming today, which feels very technically advanced for me, I have to say. But I'm very excited to be joined this morning by Dr. Jo Baldwin, and we're going to be talking all things overwhelm. And I'm particularly pleased to be talking to Jo about this topic today because I think it's something that absolutely everybody in business goes through. I would say from time to time. I think some people go through it very regularly. Some people maybe not too often, but I feel like most people are there at least some of the time. So I'm convinced we've got loads of brilliant tips to share today, Jo. So firstly, just introduce us to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've got to the point of helping people to deal with overwhelm.
Hi, Paula. Thank you. Well, I've been a certified coach and trainer since 2019. Most of my one-to-one work focuses on supporting women, typically in midlife, not always, but addressing those mindset issues that tend to hold us back and make it really hard to navigate certain sort of life transitions that we all face from time to time. But I also do some trainings and workshops for teams in small firms, typically focusing on topics around well-being in sort of all of its facets. My background was as a hospital doctor. I worked in obstetrics and gynecology in hospitals in the Liverpool and Manchester areas. And when my two daughters were tiny, I decided to leave medicine. It was that whole work-life balance thing back in the day of working 100-hour weeks.
Yeah.
And just, I wanted to raise my family, in the way I did. And so there was a big thing around that with the whole decision-making and procrastinating and what was the best thing to do. So, I feel like I come from personal experience when people are facing those sorts of things. And then a few years ago, when my elder daughter went off to university, with hindsight, it coincided with some perimenopausal symptoms, but it was that emptiness syndrome. It hit me really hard. So again, some of those things that women come with, and that sort of, what am I now if I'm not needed as a mother? What is my role? What's my identity? I can sort of relate to some of that as well. And it was really following on from that it was, what do I do now? I'm too long out of medicine, but it's always coming back to some form of helping people. Yeah. And that's when I then retrained as a coach.
Fantastic. So let's start with probably the kind of blatantly obvious, but also not so simple question of what actually is overwhelm.
I was thinking about this leading up to today's interview, and I actually ended up looking up the dictionary definition, because I know what overwhelm is, and you might know what it is for you, but we all might have different thoughts about it. We've started using it as a noun. We've said here how to ditch the overwhelm. It's actually a verb. It's to be overwhelmed or to overwhelm something. So it's really to be buried or drowned beneath a huge mass of something. So if you think about that in the context of work and the business, it might be the piles of tasks that you're feeling buried under. Feeling overcome with emotion as a result of the amount of something, so work or stress, that just feels too much to handle. So sometimes we've got a lot on our plate, but we're coping. Yeah. We're hitting deadlines, we're ticking things off the to-do list. It's when we tip over into it's too much to handle. And that's when we start to feel overwhelmed.
Yes. Interesting. Do you think overwhelm is inevitable, or actually is it something that we can control or nip in the bud or avoid?
I believe we can nip it in the bud. And coming from a medical background, obviously, the best form of medicine is prevention, preventative methods, that we can bring in if we know about them. But we keep on keeping on, don't we? We bury our head in the sand. We feel we've got to be all things to all people, keep taking on, saying yes to everything. And perhaps it's that insidious creeping on of overwhelm and we don't notice it's happening until bam, it's really hit hard. But if we've got some tools and strategies in place, maybe we can prevent it happening.
What can we look out for, Jo? Because I guess to share a personal experience, in the midst of lockdown, it was a very strange change of events. But I actually ended up being the temporary interim chief exec of a charity, which I'm normally a trustee of. And it was supposed to be just a day to day and a half a week, and business was a little bit quiet because of lockdown and various things. But it actually ended up being about 3 days a week, and I really was swamped. But it was only actually after I handed things over to a new chief exec that I suddenly realised how utterly swamped I'd been. And that, you know, I was kind of at that stage then I was really struggling to get through much work in a day. And I knew that I was super busy, but I really felt I was handling everything. And it kind of came as a surprise to realise quite how on the edge of burnout I'd been. So what can I do, or what can other people do to kind of spot it in advance and handle it better?
I suppose the signs to look for are, let's look at emotions first of all. So what emotions does overwhelm bring up? If you're starting to notice that you're feeling a little bit resentful.
Ooh, resentful, yeah.
Angry because look at all this that I've got on my plate. Why has he asked me to do that as well as?
Yes.
Was it just that you said yes, maybe? Did you have a choice, maybe? So resentment and anger. Feeling fearful, maybe about not being able to deliver on what you've promised. Maybe fearing judgment or criticism because you've not done it right, you've not done it well enough. You're fearing losing a client if you don't deliver. So a couple of different emotions there. Look out for physical symptoms. So, you know, the typical sort of panicky, anxious type of symptoms, maybe that constant feeling of butterflies in the stomach, racing pulse, sweaty palms, those sorts of things. If they're happening on a regular basis, there's something underlying that. And what's your sleep like? So typically, when we are feeling overwhelmed, it hits us at a subconscious level. And either it stops us getting off to sleep or it wakes us in the night. And you know, when you wake and you feel like you've got 500 things on the to-do list whirring around in your brain and it won't
only 500.
Well, your favourite word is bazillion, I've noticed, isn't it?
One of them.
And I remember this vividly one time, and I really felt like that. And eventually I got up, went downstairs, cup of tea, notepad and pen. Right. Come on, let's get strategic.
Get it out of the head, for sure,
No, there were 6 things on the list.
Oh, wow.
And it was, come on, there must be more, And there were 6. But it's the fact that when you're feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, you start to lose executive function. The cognitive ability goes. And the brain just feels like, you know, do you remember the old mug trees?
Yes.
Basically a sort of a pole with 5 or 6 little knobs hanging off the side, and you'd hang your mugs on them. The brain feels like it's got to the point where the mug tree is full, but you've got more mugs to hang. So I think that is a really good analogy for how I feel when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and the brain is going, have you got any more mug trees? Have you got any more mug trees? We've got one with here. So I think those are the kind of signs and symptoms to look out for.
Great. Yes, that's really good advice, Jo. So what can somebody do then, whether they're in the early stage and they kind of know this is creeping up? I think maybe let's start with that one, and then let's think about actually when someone feels like they're in the thick of it, then what can they do about it? So in terms of sort of nipping it in the bud, what are the first things that someone can do when they feel like they're approaching overwhelm, or they suddenly realize that they're in it and they need to do something?
I suppose a big thing is setting boundaries, deciding how much you're going to take on, what you're going to say yes to, what you can choose to say no to. And I really stress that word choose, because we do have a choice. And getting really clear on maybe your time blocking, the hours you're going to work, the hours you're going to allocate to certain things. Real, proper, bold self-care. Now, self-care is a term that's been bandied around so much and has got these sort of associations of bubble baths and spa days.
Yeah.
But I do a big piece of work on understanding your needs and caring for yourself. That's how I've started to sort of phrase it. From the point of view of physiological needs, so the basics like sleep, food, proper nutritious food, water, properly hydrated, not surviving on, multiple cups of coffee a day. Exercise, actually getting the body moving rather than being in that constant hunched over a laptop sort of posture. And sleep, food, water. Yeah, they're sort of basics. So your physiological needs. Then look at your psychological needs. So what is it that you need, you personally, to de-stress or to keep you free of worry? So that's going to look very different for different people. It might be that you need a bit of alone time every day or a couple of times a week. Might mean doing a meditation practice or listening to music. What is it that chills you down and de-stresses you? Relational needs. So our inbuilt human sort of default position is that we need connection. When we start to go under and start to feel a little bit depressed, low, anxious, overwhelmed, what we start to do often is withdraw, and that's the very worst thing we can do. So you start to turn down the invitations, you say no to the girlfriends, glass of wine or whatever. You just get a bit grumpy and the family are leaving you alone. And actually that's the very time when you need to be reaching out to people. So think about, who do I need? How often do I need to see people? Do I need physical touch? COVID made us all realize how important
very much so.
So there's all of that. And then spiritual needs. So for some people, that might be a religious faith or belief. It might be a spiritual belief. It might just be getting to know yourself better. And there's all sorts of different ways to approach that: journaling, gratitude practice, various sort of personal development work. So getting all of those needs met, I think, is a really solid foundation to start from.
So can I just do a devil's advocate thing there, though? Because I think what lots of people will probably say at that point in time is, I haven't got time for any of that stuff. Because, I constantly hear people who are overworked and overwhelmed say, I haven't got time for a break. I haven't got time to take lunch. I've not had a cup of tea, or I've not had a glass of water for the last 6 hours. So how do we kind of help people move from that, I just haven't got time, into, I must make this a priority?
Again, I sort of bring a medical analogy in here. Would you rather take the tablets to prevent the condition flaring up, or do you want to end up in hospital having surgery?
Yeah, it's a good
it's all
medical background.
And yet it does feel like time, but how much time do you fritter away on other things? So how much time do you fritter away on things that you think are self-care because you think you're resting, but they're actually quite numbing sort of activities? So it's when you've started to binge watch Netflix, episode after episode.
Scroll endlessly through social media.
Yeah, the scrolling, the staying up beyond bedtime, whatever bedtime is for you. The depending on things like coffee or reaching for a glass of wine when you get in from work. Now, I don't want to sound judgmental here, because we've all done it, but they feel like the right things to do, but actually they're not.
And let's face it, in your heart of hearts, you always kind of know, don't you?
Yeah.
I think the other big thing for me is I'm a real stickler for encouraging clients to take breaks and to set limits to how many hours they're going to work in a day. And very often that's a real battle of, I've got so much stuff to do, I can't leave it. But actually what people find is, when they're working tired, their productivity is absolutely terrible. So everything actually takes 2 or 3 times as long, whereas taking regular breaks or actually working less each day really ramps up the productivity. So you actually get more done. So it's in your own best interest, I find, to take regular breaks and actually work a little bit less.
Yeah. And that whole prioritizing ourselves before other people, you know, we feel like we're not supposed to do that. It's made out to be selfish. But, you know, the old analogy of the oxygen mask on the plane, you know, place your own oxygen mask before helping those you're traveling with, small children or whatever. You are no good to anybody if you're not functioning. So it's in the best interest of you and all the other people around you, the people that are important to you.
Absolutely. And for me, again, I think that's just good business practice. And it's a big mindset shift for a lot of people. But I often talk about thinking of yourself as your most important client, because actually when you focus on your own business and your business development, you're in a better position to then help more clients. So it's almost like self-care for your business as well as self-care for you.
Absolutely.
So once somebody's in that spot where suddenly the overwhelm hits them like a ton of bricks, they didn't see it coming, but they get to that point of thinking, how on earth am I going to cope with this? You know, you talked about drowning before. I really feel in that place where I'm feeling totally swamped. What can somebody do as an almost the emergency medicine at that point?
Right. So it is emergency medicine, and I call it the Overwhelm first aid kit. And it's a 10-step process. And it's, use this when you've just got to that point where there's just so much to do. It all feels emotionally too much, and you just haven't got that resilience to just bounce back and deal with it. And it helps you get on top of things, gives you some quick wins. So it's not addressing that long-term process, you know, putting prevention in place, but it's addressing things in the acute state. And I'll just very quickly run through, I won't sort of go into detail, but I have got a PDF on this if people would like it. The first step is to stop, which feels so counterintuitive, but it's a case of stopping, looking around, recognizing what's going on, recognizing that you're not functioning, and just taking a beat, taking a moment, and replenishing your energy. Now, that might mean a cup of tea, it might mean some breathing exercises, might be walking around the block, whatever. Just stop before you then carry on with the rest of it. Bring a little bit of self-compassion. So we beat ourselves up, don't we, so much. We're really hard on ourselves. We have, you know, high standards, high expectations. We, you know, have set standards that we perhaps want and targets that we want to reach in our business. And if we're not getting there, we crack the whip, and, you know, really, that inner critic comes to play, and we can be really hard on ourselves. So I talk about bringing the mother energy. So speak to yourself as if a mother would speak to her child, with encouragement, patience, compassion. So bring that to play here. And then it's a case of dumping everything out. So you remember that middle of the night list I did? Dump everything down on big piece of paper. Now, it can be work things and it can be life admin in general, because they all start to vie for attention, don't they?
They're all firing around in there, aren't they?
And I think for us in small business, many of us are working from home. It becomes really difficult to differentiate home and work. So my office ordinarily is upstairs. So the walk upstairs is the commute. But on the way, I see the pile of laundry waiting to be put away, and dirty towels on the bathroom floor that my daughter.
Lovely day for the laundry.
And the stray mugs that have been left in the office, and all of those things, and they're kind of vying for our attention. So there's something around demarcating work and home, and maybe having separate lists of things. But for this purpose, get everything down on the one list. Then you brought your mother energy a moment ago. You're now going to be your best friend. And you're going to start ditching things. So cross things off the list. Cross off those things you can't actually do anything about. They're just things that have been there worrying you for some reason. Cross off anything that isn't urgent in the next 2 days. It can wait. We'll park that. Cross off things that actually, you know, they'll never get done. So why are you worrying about them? They always feature, don't they?
Rewriting your website, just cross it off. It's been on there for the last 9 months. Cross it off.
So that's a big ditch. Now, the next part is being a best friend again, and you're going to delegate. So again, this is something that we are extraordinarily bad at. We take everything on ourselves, and we don't think to reach out for help and support. So in business, you might be a single, one-man band, one-woman band, and you are doing everything yourself. But is it time now to reach out for some technical support, some admin support? Or even look at some of the home and life stuff. What can you delegate there to reduce your load so that your focus can be on your business?
Hire a cleaner.
One. And think kind of outside the box. Think broadly here. You've got family, you've got friends, might be the neighbour's son who's a real geek that can help you with some of the computer stuff that I'm rubbish at. Think laterally, think who can help. So it could be hiring somebody like a cleaner, but it could be that somebody will be happy to just take the kids off your hands for an afternoon while you get a big piece of work done, whatever it might be. And then the next thing is refocusing on the big picture. So what is it that's important to you? What was it, the reason you set up this business for in the first place? What are you aiming for? And are some of these things on the list actually in alignment with that? Or have you gone off on a sidetrack? And should we park those for a while?
And I think it's so easy, isn't it, that you're constantly seeing what other people are doing online and immediately think, well, I've got to do that. Oh, that looks good. I must do that. And I need to add that on. And being realistic with yourself about what you're capable of is so important, isn't it? And what genuinely is a priority, as you say, it's linking things to your own goals and aims and not kind of being dragged along by other people's.
Absolutely. And then the next step is prioritizing, and I've got a whole sort of special triaging system to do the prioritizing. And then you start tackling the tasks once you've done the prioritizing. And we talk about this in the context of eating the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I'm sure you've heard that. And then resting and rewarding yourself for every task done. So I'm talking a mini rest, a little mini reward, 5 minutes with a cup of tea, 5 minutes to go and stretch your legs, go to the loo, because how often do we sit there holding on ladders, do crazy things. So
it's also that reset, isn't it, that when you do, because it's strange, I commented on somebody's post on LinkedIn this morning about taking breaks, and I said I always make sure that I'll go and make a drink or just have even if it's a 2-minute change of scene in between calls, because I think you need that to kind of allow your brain almost to file away what you've just done on the previous call and then get yourself into the mental place for the next one. Whereas when you just do that sort of hurtling from one thing to the next, you never actually get that mental reset, do you? And everything is just constantly on the go and all blended together.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it possible to talk yourself into being overwhelmed?
I think it is.
Or into feeling overwhelmed rather than being overwhelmed.
Again, it's the mindset that we sometimes have about setting standards, maybe some of those perfectionist tendencies, some of those people-pleasing tendencies. So if we've got that sort of running in the background all the time, there's this sort of a churning feeling that goes on, this having to keep going, having to reach that deadline, having to get that done for him. Oh, that's not good enough. And if that's constantly the chatter, the mindset chatter that's going on for you, then really it's no wonder that we can tip ourselves over into that feeling.
Do you think we can, for want of a better phrase, jump on the bandwagon? Because I sometimes see things on social media where you'll see the flavour of the month is, for instance, imposter syndrome. And you'll see a flurry of posts about imposter syndrome. And then before you know it, everybody on social media is talking about how they've got imposter syndrome. Can we do the same thing with overwhelm? If you see other people talk about it too much, can you actually talk yourself into it in that way?
I suppose you can. There's that unconscious bias thing, isn't there? When you fancy a new car and you fancy a particular model and you've been to the showroom to have a look at it and you're still deliberating whether you can afford it maybe. Out on the roads, how often do you see that model of car?
everywhere.
It's in there, isn't it? It's in your head, and there's
Yeah.
this then unconscious bias, and that's what you spot. Little bit similar when you hear lists of symptoms about a medical condition, or lists of the signs and the symptoms that go along with things like imposter syndrome. That's me.
Yeah.
Oh, I have that. I do that. I get that. And you start to then relate everything to yourself. So you can almost take on.
Yeah, you can talk yourself into it.
A persona, you can take on a condition, you can take on a state if you're not careful. Yeah.
Brilliant. So if you were to give somebody, let's say, I don't know, your 2 favorite tips, Jo, for whether it's avoiding getting to the place of overwhelm or managing it when you're starting to get there, what would your 2 favorite tips be?
I think there's something around maintaining our boundaries between work and home. And I think those boundaries have come so blurred in recent years, partly due to technology. Our emails are at our fingertips on our phones all the time, but starting to get quite strict about that and setting some boundaries. And there's another piece around this that I talk about, and it's called energy hangovers. So we often bring the energy of the workplace, wherever that might be for us, into the home situation. So at the end of the day, depending on what's been going on at work for us, or the kind of people we've been interacting with, could have been quite toxic, it could have been quite challenging. And if we're not careful, we bring that home, and then that invades our personal family time.
Yeah.
Similarly, in the mornings, if you've just had a row with your spouse, you can take that energy into the office or your home office or whatever it might be. So I talk to clients about bridging rituals to have a transition to leave one energy in its place before we transition into the next space. It's a conscious decision, really, and it might be the tiniest of things, or it might be quite a prolonged ritual. So I know somebody who was a dentist, multiple patients a day, running his own business, staff to deal with, and the rest of it, would come home in the evenings, had to go for a run. The wife's there with 2 small children. She wants him home as husband and father. She wants to hand those kids over. She's up to here.
Take the little
he is not fit. He cannot be what she needs from him until he'd been for that 30-minute run to basically shake off the day,
kind of decompress,
process all the stuff and decompress. So that was his bridging ritual. A client of mine worked in a really toxic office situation. And although she had a 20-minute drive home, which she felt should be enough, it wasn't. She wasn't able to shake it off. So we came up with something whereby she'd received a really beautiful hand soap as a gift, really lovely fragrance. She took this into work. She kept it in a drawer. And at the end of the day, she closed the laptop. She had a little mantra, something like, "The day is done. I can't do any more. I'm leaving the toxicity here." Something like that. She then went to the ladies with the soap and made quite a ritual of washing her hands and smelling the lovely soap. And there's a real strong link with fragrance and memories and, linking things to them. And put the soap away and drove home. And even in the drive home, she still had that lovely fragrance. And that was the sort of signal for her. Leave that energy there, and I'm now going home, and I'm ready to be mum and wife and get on with that side of life. So that's the demarcation and bridging rituals. That's one. Another one is what to do about when an unexpected nasty comes along. So you're ticking along nicely, and things are going okay. Suddenly something happens out of the blue, bam. Sideswipe, knock you off kilter, distract you big style, can easily tip you into overwhelm if you're not careful. But you're just about to do a Zoom call, do a presentation, meet with a new client. This thing can't get in the way of that at the moment. So what do you do about it? So I've got a process whereby you acknowledge the feelings that have come up with this nasty, and you package them up, and you do a mental exercise where you put them in a box, put the lid on, tie it up with string or a pretty pink bow, whatever you prefer, and you mentally sort of enact picking that box up and putting it up on a shelf.
Yeah.
You commit to coming back to that box and dealing with those emotions and that nasty at another time.
Yeah.
You can't just leave it there.
Literally boxed it off at that point, haven't you? It's I'm not ignoring it. I'm not pretending it's not there, but it's not my priority right now. That's over there. This is my priority. But
you have to have decided a date and a time and commit to that you're coming back and dealing with it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's the email that a member of staff is resigning or something, right, I'll deal with that after I've done my interview with Paula or whatever it might be.
Fab. Oh, that's brilliant, Jo. I think we've given people lots and lots of juicy tips there. Everyone's been very quiet and well behaved, actually. I know we've had quite a few people watching on LinkedIn, so that's great. I don't think we've had any comments, but sometimes the comments on LinkedIn are a little bit patchy, so I will check that later. For anybody who is watching or who comes back and watches later, please do feel free to keep adding in either any comments or any particular questions for Jo, and I'm sure she'll keep her eye on the comments and will answer any questions that you have afterwards. Jo, if people are now thinking that a lot of what you said sounds familiar and that they would love to be able to handle their own overwhelm better, but they're not quite sure how to go about it without some help, what can they get from you, or how can they find out more information about you?
My website is drjobaldwin.co.uk. I will pop my email address in the comments, so if people want to contact me that way, if you'd like that Overwhelm First Aid Kit PDF that I mentioned to get you out of that acute state, email me and I can send that to you. I have got a group coaching program coming up just for women, so sorry chaps, which is called More Like Myself. So we're going to be looking at why we're just not feeling ourselves anymore, why we've perhaps lost the sparkle, and where's she gone, that girl I used to be, and how can we get some of that back? So overwhelm, inner critic, looking after our needs and caring for ourselves really, really properly, really deeply. All of that is going to come into that identity. And I'm starting that mid-September. There's going to be a free workshop to sort of introduce that and the topics on the 5th of September. So look out for posts about that. If that's something that you think you might be interested in, as I say, just drop me a line on my email address.
Wonderful. Sounds fabulous, Jo. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm sure, like I say, we've shared lots of wonderful, juicy tips for people. So hopefully everyone has got lots of value from that and lots of different ways that they can now get in touch with you. I think we should definitely all come along and steal your PDF and learn lots of juicy ways to handle all of our overwhelm. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who has watched us. Like I say, please do feel free to keep adding in comments or questions, and both myself and Jo will keep an eye on those. So enjoy the rest of your Friday. Let's all feel calm and serene and not remotely overwhelmed, and life will be wonderful. So thank you, Jo, and thank you to everybody who watched us, and we'll see you back here very soon. Goodbye.
Bye.